Welcome to the CEO.com show. My name is Clint Betts. How are you? Look at these hats. Here's a hat. Here's a hat. Here's a hat. Here's a coffee mug. You may be asking yourself, how do I get one of these things? It's easy. Give us a 5-star review and rating on Apple Podcasts, and we'll send this to you. Just send me an email, clint@ceo.com, with a screenshot of your review, and I will give you one of these. You can also get all of them, including a hoodie, if you go to share.ceo.com. That's share.ceo.com, so you can share our newsletter. We send out a newsletter. You've got to check out the newsletter. It's so great. On today's show, I talked to Liz Wiseman, a New York Times best-selling author. Multipliers is what she's most famous for, but all of her books are incredible. She's got a new one coming out. We talked about leadership, issues, politics at work, a variety of different things. You're going to really enjoy this conversation. I love Liz Wiseman. It was an honor to have her on the show. And here is our conversation. Liz, thank you so much for coming on. We've had you come speak at a number of Silicon Slopes events at Silicon Slopes Summit, and you're always like the highest rated speaker. You've become this incredible like keynote author, thought leader, incredible just leader when it comes to leadership, which must be interesting to you. You're like a leader of leaders.
Yeah, I don't really consider myself an expert on leadership. Like sometimes people say that, but I think of myself as kind of a student of just trying to figure it out. And yeah, like I think I have just a lot of questions about what makes a good leader and why, and people who seem like good leaders, but actually do a lot of damage. And I don't know, it's just something I've been curious about. So I see myself as kind of a postdoc grad student who just can't seem to leave college on this topic.
And you had a #1 New York Times bestseller, Multipliers, and it was about how do the best leaders make everyone smarter. So maybe that would be a good place to start for this audience and for the CEO.com community, is how do the best leaders make everyone smarter?
Well, I think, and probably in short, there's probably 2 short ways I can explain this. One is they make other people smarter by not needing to be the smartest person at the table. Even if someone, and don't get me wrong, like there's nothing wrong with being smart. And, if you ask me to describe my ideal leader, like someone I would want to work with or for, I want to work with someone who's brilliant, but someone who's confident enough in their own intelligence, like they're comfortable inhabiting their intelligence to the point where like, yeah, I'm brilliant and I'm over it. And so I can spend my time, like I want people on the other side of questioning their brilliance. Like I get it. Like I'm a bit of a genius, or I have a lot of talent. Now what I can do is not need to prove that every day and spend my time trying to see and use and grow the intelligence of others. Like we make other people smarter by not having to focus entirely on our own intelligence. And boy, if I can sum up what I've learned writing Multipliers and sharing Multipliers as a book, is that what these leaders do that bring out the best in others is that they create, like when I look at all the practices and the mindsets, I can kind of boil it down to 2.5 words. So it's like, let's skip the book. Like just 2.5 words down and you've got it, is safety and stretch. And is that little half word. But what the best leaders do is they create like a safe environment. And we've heard a lot about psychological safety and inclusion, belonging, and they create safe places for people to experiment and take risks and to speak up and speak truth to power. People feel appreciated. That's a great place to work. But if you've ever worked for someone who's all safety, no stretch, that is not a great place to work. Like, right. Hey, Liz, we appreciate you, but like, it's great to be appreciated, but if no one ever asks you to do anything hard or pushes you challenges you, kind of kicks you out of your comfort zone, that's not really a place you're going to do great work. And so they balance that with stretch, challenge, hard questions, holding people accountable, high expectations. They're leaders who are comfortable inviting other people to be uncomfortable. So it's like they create a comfortable work environment with the intention of making that an uncomfortable work environment.
Right.
And I think because you can't be uncomfortable until you first feel comfortable.
Right.
And so it's like getting this equilibrium between safety and stretch, like in the long arc, but also like in a given meeting. How do you make it safe for people to speak up? But then how do you create enough stretch so that people don't just speak up with the old flat thinking?
Let me ask you this. I'm sure you've been following the news around like Basecamp, which is like a project management software company who banned political discussions from the workplace. Coinbase is actually probably a more prominent example of that. Actually, a really big cryptocurrency company. What are your thoughts on stuff like that? When you see something like that, do you see that as like a failure of leadership in that they couldn't do this equilibrium that's needed that you're describing around safety and stretch? Or is it like just them punting? Or is it like, why would you talk about those things? I actually don't know.
Boy, it's one of these things that might seem smart on the surface, but maybe misguided in the long run. And I think there's a whole set of these things we're doing at a societal level, because like in the name of inclusion and belonging and safety, we say like, ooh, these are topics that we shouldn't, these are words we shouldn't use. These are topics that we shouldn't use. But, the danger is if you don't give people a place to express themselves, that has to go somewhere. And it tends to go underground. And, let me just speak from my experience, not as a leader, not as a contributor, but as a parent. Like, as schools started to say, well, okay, here's sort of like acceptable behavior, here's acceptable topics, here's acceptable points of view. I've had an experience where I had a kid who said some things like, in teenage years where you're kind of like working it out and trying to figure out the world and who you are, and like said some things that were, suspended from school, like, not vilified, but, kind of pariah like. And it's like, wait a minute, like, how do you help people work through their beliefs on things and learn how to be thoughtful and sensitive and see multiple perspectives if you never get to talk about what you're seeing or thinking? And I think we end up pushing a lot of things underground. And, I think politically we've seen a backlash that has happened in our nation where people feel like certain things are undiscussable, certain ideas are taboo, are unacceptable, are deplorable, are whatever. And then it's like, well, that goes somewhere. It's going to go
not
somewhere.
like we stop talking about those things or stop thinking, or people don't stop thinking, or I hear what you're saying. It kind of goes underground, and it seems like, do you think it's stunting
and then it
growth?
comes up.
Yeah, like, is it stunting our growth as like a society and like our ability to learn and our ability to be comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Well, I think it is. And like, when I go back to my experience as a parent, I'm like, wait a minute, if like my kid has said something that made someone uncomfortable, can we not use this as a chance to educate about the consequences of that and explore it, which is what we did as a family. And it was a really positive outcome, but there was this knee-jerk reaction of, okay, now we need to take sort of legislative action and we need to like file a police report or whatever. And it's like, wait a minute, but I'm so oriented towards like, can we not just learn from these experiences. And so I would want our workplace to be similar, where I would want to work on a team where people could speak their mind, not in a way like, I think this, but explore issues from multiple angles and debate and kind of prosecute issues, and people can speak truth to power, and people can have diverse points of view. We do better work and we make better decisions. So sterilizing the work environment seems like what you do when you can't figure out how to create a place where people can talk intelligently about diverse opinions and perspectives. So it's like, yeah, okay, I guess that's what we do when we can't do what we really need to do. But surely there are consequences to this.
Yeah, it does seem like it felt to me like it was when these were coming out. And there's probably, I have no idea, right? I've never led a company like Coinbase, like that growth, that number of employees, what's going on in their internal communications, that type of stuff. And they may like, hey, we just need to focus on building this product. This is getting out of hand. I don't know. But it did feel like it was a punt. Like it was just like punting. Like let's just get rid of this as though it's gonna go away, like you said. Like if we just say you can't talk about it, then no one's gonna talk about it. But that's not true. It's just gonna go underground.
Okay, so now let me argue the other side of it, which is I understand the punt, and because like in my mind, in my ideal space, we should be able to learn from everyone. And so I study leadership. I write about leaders and good leadership. And I like to use a wide variety of examples when I do that. And I always think, oh, having a wide variety of examples is helpful. And I've seen comments from readers, which is, I can't believe you used this person like in your book. And I think there's times I've included examples of like Barack Obama, President Obama, President Bush, Mitt Romney. There's stories I've told about from the Israeli military. And I've gotten people saying like, how dare you? Like, that's a terrible person. That's a terrible organization. Those people are idiots. So why would you use them as an example of good leadership?
Right.
And I was like, well, did they not read the part of the book that says, hey, I've included some diverse things. Like, I encourage you to learn from people, even those with whom you disagree. And like, that's all Susie Sunshine, but that's not how some people can. And I remember there's this one particular, it was from a country, and there were several people who were saying like, we hate this example because like we shut down instantly when we hear it. And, I faced a decision. Do I leave that in or do I change that? Because when people shut down instantly, then the learning can't occur. And so let's go back to a base camp and the others. Is like, if you get people who are so entrenched and polarized that just the mere mention of certain ideas like is triggering, well, you need to create an environment where people can think and do good work. And if people get agitated, triggered, and when people shut down immediately, then learning stop. So really, where does the onus sit? In some ways, it sits on all of us to not shut down. And so like, I don't know if the answer is like companies should have this policy or that policy. It's like, how do we bring like enough of an open mind to our work that we can learn even when we hear things we disagree with? Like, and that seems so simple. Like, why can't we do that?
I know.
What do you think? What's going on?
I don't know. Like when I look at like what Basecamp has done and what Coinbase is done, I'm not sure what I would do in that situation, or because we are more polarized now. That seems like a fact, right? And to me, it's odd to talk politics at work. I would never do, but I don't talk politics not at work. Right. And so that's like, not that guy. I don't do that. And so I would find it odd if somebody came to me with like a political point of view or something at work, I'd be like, I don't know. You see the, Bills game last night or something? I would just wouldn't feel comfortable talking about politics, mostly because I don't know anything about politics. But it seems like, if you're building project management software, if we take Basecamp, for example, and you're trying to solve inside of Basecamp with a team of like 50 people, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm not sure that's a useful useful use of everyone's time there, right? I'm not sure that anyone is looking to Basecamp to solve that problem. And so I see when I believe his name is Jason Fried, the CEO of Basecamp, when he puts out like, hey, we can't solve this problem. We build project management software. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. No one's looking to you to solve that problem either. But I wonder if that's true. It does seem like corporations are becoming more respected. Like there's polling on this even. Like corporations and corporate leaders are becoming more respected and more looked to solve societal issues than they ever have previously. And politicians and these types of folks seems to be people are not looking to them as much as they used to. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think this is like a solid observable trend in that, corporations have become our de facto public policy makers that for whatever reason, for a number of reasons, our lack of trust in our government institutions to be creating like social policy, like that has become like we've defaulted on that. It's like defunct. And so corporations have stepped into that space and, they've done it, I think, primarily as a recruiting tool to say, this is what we value. This is what we stand for. And like often in the name of inclusivity or policies. But what's happened now is our companies are becoming, the policymakers and the heads of these companies are becoming hostage to like the activism of the employee base, which I think is a dangerous position to be in. Like, in some ways, there's something really good when our biggest corporations are active in like the social agenda and the political agenda and business policy, but we have to remember they have an interest that they're serving. And, what happens when you become hostage to the whims of your employee base? Let me go back to parenting. Like, like I don't know if I understand politics. So like a couple things I understand. I understand being a parent, and my husband is a lot nicer than I am, and we have 4 kids, and he would say like to the kids, "Hey, what do you want for lunch?" Well, this one wants a BLT, and this one wants a macaroni and cheese, and I'm like, no. Like, see, when you start catering to like the personal opinions of each child, like you can't win that. I'm like, kids, we're having turkey sandwiches for lunch. Come to lunch. Like there's some, like what if I was as a parent, like trying to create a popularity contest, which is I am catering to the opinions of my kids. Like, hey kids, what do you want for dinner? Do you want ice cream or do you want lasagna? It's like, so like all of these things have consequences. And I think we have to be really careful about like, I think we have to be careful about catering to whims. Like, oh, gee, that opinion hurt my feelings. Let's not have it in the workplace.
Right.
And how do we?
That's interesting. I'm not sure. Let me give you a real world example that's somewhat somewhere along the lines of what we're talking about here. And it's coming up. It's happening to me right now. So I'm going to get your advice on this. So we're holding a big event through Silicon Slope, which is the nonprofit that we run in the state of Utah, in October. And right now in the state of Utah, There's no, you don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to be vaccinated. In fact, they're like one of the states that are like actively saying like passing laws so you can't do things like that, right? And so, ironically and strangely, and I'm in the middle of this right now. And so it's like top of
Never
mind.
thought you would be dealing with this issue like
Yeah.
3 years ago. You could have never imagined that this would be such an issue.
And so, yeah. So like we want to make a safe, obviously healthy event. We want, those who are vaccinated to be able to come, those who aren't vaccinated to show a negative COVID test, wear a mask, everyone's safe, all this type of stuff. What blows my mind in this that I still can't wrap my head around is that I'm making that call. Isn't that odd? Like, and that kind of goes back to like this corporate leadership that we're looking for, because the government has basically said in the state of Utah, like, we
Messy of an issue.
Yeah, they're like, we're not gonna say you have to mandate. We're not gonna do all this type of stuff. And so now it's up to like me, and what do I know about that? And
like,
so
how did I end up making this decision about public health?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know anything about public health. And, we're talking to like the, state health department, this county health department, like all as governments as much as we can. But like, we were like, we want to follow your guidelines. What should we be doing? How do we do this so that it's safe? How do we do this so the speakers who come in, the attendees, all this type of stuff is safe? And a lot of the time it's just like, it's like, really like kind of washing the hands. And so it's really like we were having a conversation as a board, and it's like, isn't it weird that we're deciding if people need like Clint Betts is deciding if people should wear masks at a place that they're at? That doesn't compute. That would never have computed 3 years ago, like you said.
Yeah. And it's like, I kind of hate the word trigger, but I think it's appropriate here is that we are becoming a very easily triggered people. That, we take a decision and that decision carries so much weight. Like, well, if you make me wear a mask, then like there's a whole set of things that go with it. Or if you don't wear a mask, then we just keep loading onto that truck. Well, then you must be this and that and this And I think we need to start to back those away and treat decisions like this more in isolation and not just load everything onto it. One of the principles that I've noticed in the best leaders and how they debate is they do it surgically. In a sense, we're on public health here. They do it surgically in that they don't load other issues onto it, which if we're going to debate an issue, we're going to debate this issue. So it's not like, you go in for knee surgery and then the surgical team says, oh, well, you got weak ankles too. And by the way, you could probably use a little tuck and a tighten there. And we're going to do this and we're going to tune up that. Like they treat one issue at a time. And, there's focus there. And I think there's a lot of places where we would benefit from that kind of focus. Like, let's just look at this issue without loading so much onto it. Boy, it's a tough decision about what is that role. But as I think about what leaders are, the decisions people are having to make, and some of that triggering, the fast associations that we tend to be laying onto things is, what we can do is we can just create more transparency.
Yeah.
Because I think that what trigger people, which is like, okay, I don't know what's going on there. So therefore something nefarious, self-serving, there's some agenda there that I can't see. So I mistrust it. So what can we do? Transparency. Here are all the issues we looked at. Here are the things we wrestled with. Here were the pros, here were the cons. And I think this can alleviate some of this, but it's the exact opposite of what we tend to do. Like when things are really confusing and critical and they're high stakes decisions that have all these sensitivities, those are the things we should open up, but they tend to be the things that we keep close, like, ooh, I don't know what the right decision is here. And this is fraught with issues. So let's just sort of like make it in a closet and then let's like announce it and then hide and go back into the closet because this is surely controversial. Whereas this is when we need to do the exact opposite, which is here were the concerns, here are the people we brought in and why, here's the criteria we established, the issues we wrestled with, like this. And then in the end, after all of that, that we felt like this was the best thing to do. But we tend to do the opposite.
Yeah, we tend to the hard ones. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no matter what we decide and ultimately put out for this event, for example, we're gonna get backlash. There will be op-eds written in favor or against, for sure, no matter what we do, right? But it makes sense to, I hear what you're saying, to be transparent about here's everything that went into this decision. And, you know, our goal at the end of the day is just to have a safe and healthy event. And, you know, we're just trying to accomplish that. But the fear is there no matter what. Anyone who says there what isn't the fear doesn't, you know, is lying as far as I'm concerned, because there's real backlash to these decisions. The high stake backlash maybe not be the consequences to the decisions that are high stakes like that.
So I'm going to just share a little observation that I've had as an executive coach. And I find that there's this universal fix to almost every problem. So when executives like would tell me like, here's what I'm working on, here's what I'm worried about. Like, okay, I really need to move this person into this role. But if I move this person into this role, this person's going to feel like they're not a critical part of the team and there's not a future for them in the organization. Or they're explaining like a decision they have to make. And almost all of these, I would find that if I simply said to them, this is a little coaching tip for those who might be listening who do some coaching, I'd be like, well, what would happen if you explained that to those people? Like, okay, well, if we do this, I'm afraid that one is not going to feel like, you know, he's a critical member of the team going forward. I'm like, well, have you explained that to him? No. Well, like, what would happen if you just sat him down and explained your logic? And it'd be like, oh, well, that wouldn't be a problem. Or there's another executive like, okay, you know what? Like, I've really tried to build bench strength. Everyone wants me in the meetings, but I really got to build my team. I need to send them off to the meeting. This was at Apple, by the way, and it was a very senior person. And like, okay, but if I send this person, like, they're going to just like slaughter him and like, and then they're going to push back. Why weren't you there? And this, I'm like, well, what would happen if you told them, hey, I'm trying to build the bench strength on my team, and I'm going to be sending in some of the more junior people where I normally would come. And, you know, they're going to be a little weak on some things. And like, you might be disappointed. And then when I check, he's like, yeah, I'm doing that. Checks back, I don't know, 2 weeks later, my how's that going? He goes, you know what? Not only do they not attack him, like it invoked a mentoring gene. And now suddenly these people are like, oh, let me help, like bring up this next person and let me teach them, let me coach them. And the universal like fix on so many of these things that just eat at us is explain our intent. Like we're trying to create an environment where people feel safe physically, but also not encumbered. Like this is what we are trying to do. This is our intent and this is what we're considering. And in the end, we've come down. But like when we explain our intent, because everyone can see the outcome, but no one gets to see our intent.
Right.
Of course, there's this cliche that we judge others by their actions and we judge ourselves by our intent. This is human nature. But, you know, that's part of that transparency. It's like, here's what I'm trying. Here's what I want to happen. Like for me, for you, for us.
Yeah, I think transparency is the key in those high stakes decisions. And it is fascinating that most leaders do the opposite. It really is like, we're going to make the announcement and then come hide in the closet and see what backlash we get and see what we have to explain.
Hope nobody notices. Like maybe if I just stick, my head down for a day or two, it'll pass like a storm.
You had one of the most fascinating talks I've ever heard at BYU a few years ago, where you talked about, is there actually more power in not knowing? You must get asked about that talk, and I think they call it devotionals, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure what.
I think yeah, it was technically a forum, and
Okay.
devotionals, I think, is what they call for like the church
Oh, okay. Yeah.
authorities. Like,
Okay.
and forums are for just like, civilians. So people are like, I
But
listened to your devotional. That was not a devotional. That was a forum, but I think it's all lumped in as a devotional. Yeah.
yeah. So is there actually more power in not knowing?
I think there can be. I mean, not always. Like, ignorance is not always power. Like, to do, I have no idea what I'm doing. But when we're very aware that we don't know, something happens. And, it happens to us both as leaders and contributors. It's like for leaders, when we know, nobody else has to know. Like, people just follow the boss. Oh, the boss has a plan, I'll do that. But like when a leader is uncertain, I don't mean waffling, like, I don't know what we should do, but like, you know what? We have to decide what our mask policy is or our vaccination policy is around this really large gathering that affects a lot of people. Like, here's what I know, but here's what I don't know. And we have to figure out. When a leader can do that, and I think there's a lot of strength in just saying, I do know this. So it's not like, I don't know. It's, I do know this. Like, I know A, B, C, and D, but I don't know this. And that's what we have to figure it out. One, it signals to the whole team, like, turn your brain on. Like, we have an unsolved problem here. So we are operating without an answer. So we need to find an answer. And then it also signals, as your leader, I don't have the answer. So don't look to me. I just framed the problem. So like all of you, like, are going to be part of solving this answer. And it also signals just enough vulnerability and weakness in the leader that people are like, oh, you can't do this without me. And we actually love working for people who can't do things without us. Like, people love being valuable and indispensable. It's like, who wants to work for someone who's got it all figured out? Like, but we don't want to work for like the lackey leader who's like, I don't know anything. Like, we want to work for someone who's got a lot figured out, but not everything, because that's where we get to come in and we get to play big. And, you think about the characters in a movie that you root for. Like, who are the characters you're drawn to? It's not the invincible folks. It's usually people who have a crack somewhere, like some hole, something that's just a little bit, I don't know, relatable. And we cheer for them. And I think we cheer for leaders who need us. And so as a leader, I think there's incredible power when you say, I don't have all the answers. Like, it puts us in the mode of asking questions and listening and valuing other people. So like, but a bunch of goodness just follows. And then I think for ourselves, like, when we're convinced we know something, like, we go into little like performance mode, dictator mode, like, I got the answers, versus the person who says, like, I don't know. I don't know for certain. And it just keeps us open. Like, what should the mask policy be for the state of Utah? I don't know. But like, I can convince myself on almost any issue I know. I'll be like, oh, I know what we should do. I know what Utah should do. I know what California should do. I know what we should do about this. And then I'm like, I don't know that. And like, it creates this like humility and curiosity and tolerance, and it propels us forward. Like, we don't like staying in a state of not knowing. Like, a state of not knowing is not inherently good. It's what happens. It's how we get out of that state that's valuable. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm just getting old, or I'm old. But it's one of those. Maybe it's a cliche that, like, as you get older, you're far more convinced about what you don't know. Our youngest son, he's always like, Mom, like, are you sure about that? Like, I'll say something like, and he said, are you sure about that? I'm like, no, of course I'm not sure about it. Like I think this, but I'm not sure. And I would say, like, Josh, I'm not really sure about anything. Like there's most things I'm not sure about. And he has asked me this like so many times. And I'm like, Josh, once again, no, I'm not sure. But I actually think it's not a bad way to stay.
How
Even my
detrimental
own research
is,
and things I read about, I'm not so sure about them. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
that isn't that interesting, and just the power in that is beautiful. That you're not saying you have all the answers. Like at the beginning of this interview, you just talked about how I'm a student of leadership. I'm not a leader of leaders. I want, I'm studying this, which actually makes you a leader of leaders, which is fascinating to me. But my question to you is because what you were just describing there was like ego getting in the way of actually solving the problem, actually pressing forward, actually progressing. And I wonder if you've thought about how detrimental ego can be in the domain of leadership.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it is the big barrier. And but you need to, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on ego, sort of the psychology of ego, but as a layperson on this, like you need a healthy ego to be a leader. Like, okay, I'm going to make a decision on our COVID mask vaccination policy, whatever you want to call it, for the Silicon Slopes Tech Summit. Like, you need a fairly healthy ego to think that you can make that decision and to be able to withstand whatever pushback. Like whoever's listening to this, like go easy on Clint. Like this is a tough position that he's in. Like, cut the man some slack. Like whatever position you're on, like this is a tough position to make a call on this. But it's like it takes some ego to withstand it, and it's lonely. That's one of the things. Serving as an executive coach is one of the things you learn is how lonely it is to be at the so-called top of an organization. You get no feedback. Like people are your friends, but no one really is your friend. It's
Hmm.
like you have to make tough decisions in isolation. You live in an echo chamber. Like there's so many things that make that a lonely job. And so, and you need a healthy ego to withstand some of the challenges, the blows, the failures that you have to absorb. But yeah, like what's too much ego?
Yeah, this is the thing that's always fascinating
Where
me
does
with
that
like
become
folks.
detrimental?
Yeah, and like think about this is why I'm fascinated with like the president of the United States or anyone who raises their hand and says I should be president of the United States. Like I should be the leader of the free world. Like man, to get to that place in your head where like that should be you is that the psychology of that is so fascinating to me. Where like yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the one who needs like what George W. Bush is like I'm the decider. Man, I I don't know that I
Yeah,
like
and
that
because like
idea.
today's climate, you are saying you want to be the most vilified, least popular person in the world. Like, I want to be the most hated person because, it's kind of now become an untenable, unwinnable job.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
I
for
think we've
sure.
seen the last few administrations, like some people love you, other people hate you completely. Like, I think we've changed our views on how we see our presidents and leaders. But yeah, and, I imagine you've seen that the research on the jobs where you get the highest levels of like clinically narcissistic and sociopathic kinds of individuals. Do you know the list?
Yeah.
Very high on this list are CEOs, like presidents, like
Yeah.
politicians, pastors,
Really
nurses, and doctors.
interesting.
Yeah, think about what's common in all of those jobs. I almost want to pull this up. Like I've seen this so many times in different articles and like floating around the internet. Like what's common across all those jobs?
It's
Like,
like authority, right?
Yeah, and it's authority, but it's not like authority as in prison warden authority.
Right.
It's saving. Like I can fix things. I can save you. You know,
Mm.
yeah, it's kind of like this power, but it's kind of this benevolent power of like, I can show you the way. Like I can help you. I can save you. I can fix you. Um, and like, I think we have to be careful about what happens when we go down that path.
How have you done it? How have you managed this as you wrote multipliers, which shot you up and that must have been amazing to go through that big of a success. And how have you managed your life since then? Like, how do you manage what we're talking about here?
Oh, this is so easy. I have 4 children. So, you know, whatever like highfalutin feedback and praise I get from the world, like my kids are like, in fact, my youngest, he's like, Mom, it's so strange that I know people who think you're so smart. And like, why is that? Like, I don't know. You're just my dumb mom. And, and so, like your kids keep you pretty humble. Like they don't care.
Yeah.
In fact, I just wrote this new book and I, I have 4 kids, and one of them was like working for me for the summer. So she was forced to read it because she got paid to read it. And then I like got the galley copies and I give one to my 22-year-old son. And he's like, yeah, I'd like really like to read that. I don't think he's opened it. And then, my other daughter, I like take it and I like leave it on her like coffee table. And then I come back like 2 weeks later. She lives in Utah. I come back, sell it. And I'm like, oh, I might have to sneak in her bedroom, put that on her nightstand. I'm like, would you please read the book? And then I send them off to college and I'm like, send them off and I'm packing a suitcase. And I'm like, I just packed it right on top. Like, and they're like, no, it's taken them years to even like read this stuff. And so it keeps you humble, which is like, you know what? None of that's important.
Interesting.
It's like not the things that drive your most important relationships. And I joke about I'm trying to get my kids to read my book, but not really. Like they're not going to, or eventually they will. But probably when their like boss says, "Oh, by the way, you should read this book," and they're like, "Okay, I guess I have to now." But like none of those things, like the parts of our jobs that create status or whatever, like none of your kids are impressed with that. Like there's this great, I don't know if you've read Work Rules by Laszlo Bach. He's got an endorsement on the back of it. He's got a bunch of, high-powered endorsements. And on the bottom of it is an endorsement from, was it Meredith? Meredith, who's 5 years old, who just said, this is a boring book. It's his daughter.
That's beautiful.
I love that Laszlo put that on his book. Yeah.
How did you get so good at speaking in front of people? Was that always natural for you, or like how did you develop that skill?
Well, I was kind of born a little bossy, a little mouthy, like from a young age. But I'm part of a lay church where you get opportunities to give talks when you're like, I don't know, you can barely walk and, you're given a chance. And so you'd learn to not be afraid of having something to say. And you also learn to not be too worried if, half of the congregation is sleeping while you're talking. And, I never went through any formal training, but, in my management experience at Oracle, you have to have a point of view and you have to be able to argue it. I, work for Oracle. You have to go in and meet with Larry Ellison. You better have your ideas sharpened or he'll sharpen you. And then just lots of experience. And I'll give you a little tip. This is for anyone listening who has like a fear of public speaking. It is so much easier to speak in front of a large group of people than a small group of people. Like everyone says, like, in fact, I just heard someone on Tuesday night say, oh, I hate public speaking. Like I can talk in front of like 8 people, but like a group, that's terrifying. okay, here's the dirty secret is if you're speaking, okay, this might make people who are afraid of public speaking now truly terrified. So, but so when you speak in front of a large group of people, nobody is going to interrupt you. Nobody is going to yell, that's dumb. I disagree. I think you're wrong. That's far more likely to happen in a room with 8 people.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's in some ways, it's so easy in a large group. Like there's no reason to be afraid of it. Like if someone's going to, stand up and yell, you're an idiot and I disagree, security is probably going to take them out of the room.
And the rest of the audience is going to come to your defense just because no one wants to be a part of that.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of things I've learned about speaking, and like the best speakers aren't great speakers. They create an environment where everyone is thinking. And that's, I think, what I try to do is how do you create a discussion? Like you are the discussion leader, but you are not the only thinker in that room. And the goal is that every seat has thinking happening in it, that it's not a speech on a stage. It's an entire auditorium of people who are thinking hard about tough issues.
Who are leaders you admire?
Oh, it's such a hard question. There are so many people. One of my favorite leaders is Dow Wilson, who is just now retired as the CEO of Varian, a medical device company. And he also happened to be like one of my church leaders, a stake president, in the LDS church. And he's incredibly smart and incredibly competent and talented and organized, but you never feel intimidated by him. Like he just makes he has his way of putting people at ease, but he's not loosey-goosey. Like he's sharp and he runs a major organization. He's one of the people that I've always admired.
What was Larry Ellison like?
Larry Ellison is as advertised.
Yeah.
I get asked a fair bit, like, is Larry Ellison a diminisher? And my observation is yes, to some, and maybe to a lot. But one of my colleagues at Oracle, who was also there fairly early on, Dennis Moore, said, with Larry, if he trusted you, there was no greater multiplier. And so if you were like in his inner circle and he trusted you, so like if he had access to you somehow, like he was amazing. And this was my experience. I didn't work closely with him because Larry spent most of his time on the technology side of the business, but I worked close enough with him that I felt trusted by him. And he gave me big jobs to do. And he created a culture where people like me right out of school were suddenly like thrust into management roles and given big operations and, mega multi-million-dollar budgets to run. And he trusted us to do this. I was like, man, this is an adult job. And what's wrong with him? And the other people, like, do they not understand? Like, I wouldn't let like someone my age drive my car now. That like, I was like, man, he entrusted his enterprise to a bunch of kids. And I was one of them. And he had high expectations and, you show up prepared and he's smart. But he was an incredible learner. Like I would watch him go into meetings where he didn't know something and he would like come out of that meeting, like really having, like I've watched him listen to people and learn from people. But if he didn't trust you, bozo bit flipped, as they said. And, he could be very dismissive. And, it's one of the challenges of leaders who start a small company and then grow it big. Like, okay, you start it with your 10, smartest, most capable buddies. But then when you said they've got 10,000 people, I don't know about them. Like, where did they come from? Like, what if they didn't graduate from MIT? Like, can they still write good code? Or like, are they a bozo? And so I think it's easy for a leader to get pulled down this path of, when you don't know someone, you assume some lack of capability or some ill intent. And it's like, how do you hold that assumption, not just for the people you know well, but like give everyone a chance to prove that they're smart and capable and well-intended. And it's a challenge, because you get these exceptions that pop up to your office, like, wow, that person did damage to our company. Like, we have to exit them. Who else might be doing damage?
How do you deal with diminishers? I know that you've given a whole talk on that, but I only have one other question after this, because I know we're short on time.
Well, how do you deal with diminishers? The short answer is you do the exact opposite of what you want to do. So do you remember that Seinfeld episode where George Costanza, who's like constantly bumbling at work, he decides he's going to do the exact opposite of what he thinks he should do.
And it's a great episode.
Wildly successful. That's what we do with diminishers. Because, so let's say you've got someone who's micromanaging you. Like, what do you want to do? Keep them out of your meetings, keep them out of your work. Like, don't let them look at what you're doing. Well, what happens when you try to keep a control freak out of what you're doing? They like double down. What happens when you argue with a know-it-all? Like, what we tend to do is we judge the diminishing leader as ineffective, and we're like, you're doing it wrong. Your like view of me is wrong. And we tend to push them away in a pretty judgmental way. Like, you're not a good leader. I'm keeping you out of my space. But then it just exacerbates the problem. We try to push them away, but what we really should do is pull them close. Not like hold your enemies close, but like, you know what? You want to have control. Come here. Let me show you my work. You know what? Come to the meeting, but let me give you a job to do. Like, frame it, and then let me run it. And then, you know, you can come in here, or, you know what? You're not listening to me. Let me listen to you first. And when we do the exact opposite, we almost always get it right. But really, the exact opposite is to be a multiplier to them, which doesn't turn them magically into a multiplier. What it does is it just simply changes the dynamic. It builds trust.
Right. Tell us about this new book.
Well, the new book is a book my children haven't read yet, other than the one I paid to read it. So no, the book is called Impact Players, and the subtitle is How to Take the Lead, Play Bigger, and Multiply Your Impact. And what it's looking at is, in some ways, it's the other side of the mountain from multipliers. So multipliers looks at what can leaders do to create an environment where people are contributing at their fullest. And what I looked at was, well, what's the contributor side of that relationship? And who are the people who are contributing at their fullest and having a major impact? And what are they doing differently? Just like we looked at the leaders' mindsets and behaviors, what are the mindsets and behaviors of top contributors? And how are they thinking differently? What are their assumptions? And what are some of the small differences in how they, in their mental game, that cause them to make a big impact? And what I love about this kind of study and this piece of work is the way I was able to build this framework is interviewing managers. And it's like, tell me about someone who's having a major impact versus someone who's doing a great job. But both of them need to be smart, talented, and hardworking. So like in a room full of equally smart, talented, hardworking, why are some people end up going through the motions and other people bring incredible value and have impact and really make a difference? Like, I want to know, not based on their capability or work ethic, like based on their thinking and behavior. And I found some really interesting differences. And, you know, my hope is that people who are really hardworking but feel like they're not having an impact and feel maybe even exhausted might find some ideas, which is like, I don't have to work any harder. I don't have to be any more talented. I can't be any smarter than I am, but I want more impact, and that they might find a few ideas.
Mm. When does it come out?
October 19th.
Awesome. Liz, thank you so much for coming on. It means a lot. I always enjoy talking to you, watching you speak, reading your books. You're a wonderful person. Thank you for everything you're doing in the world.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to talk, and for putting out this wrestle. Like, how do we deal with hard, controversial issues where we feel like we can't win?
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
We'll
I'm
see.
living one right now.
Yeah. You know what? Be transparent, and you'll get it right. You and the team will get it right.
Awesome. Thanks, my friends. Good seeing you.
Okay. Good talking to you.